from out of the United Nations. I'm Michael Laramie, this year's Secretary General, and I would now like to introduce Superintendent of Schools at Northeastern Clinton Central School, who has supported this program very greatly throughout the years, Mr. Christopher Granford.
Well, as Mike said, it's the 11th annual North Country Model UN Conference. Welcome to Northeastern Clinton Central School, to one of the most unique educational experiences you'll find in the state of New York. Where else can you find 15 school districts, nearly 500 students joining together for 3 days of intense discussion and debate? 3 days of hard work, all in pursuit of greater understanding and solutions for many elusive problems which can be found as we survey the numerous troubled areas around the globe. Most interesting to me, and certainly all to your credit, is the fact this program has been entirely planned, organized, and carried out by you as students. My congratulations to each of you for your creativity, your effort, and your achievement. I wish you success these next 3 days. May I, on your behalf, thank your teachers, advisors, administrators, as well as Northeastern Clinton's Mr. Harry McManus for encouraging your participation here today. Good luck as you begin your deliberations. Thank you.
Now our keynote speaker who is coordinator of Latin American Studies at SUNY Plattsburgh and also an associate professor of political science and at SUNY Plattsburgh, Dr. William Culp.
Usually these microphones are a little bit too low for me. I'm very pleased to be here this morning. I'm a resident of this district. I was in the school board for a while, and I followed the growth of the model UN, and it's a great thing to see that they had to move from another room, the junior high school cafeteria auditorium, down to this room. I suspect they continue to grow as more and more students find the value of having been involved in it. I think there's probably a program around that calls for Frank Bryant, who's calling to my political science at the University of Vermont, to make it today. He would have been a very good speaker to come here. He's very interested in these kinds of things, and I'm sure you would have gotten a great deal out of it. He has a particular line he likes to address, which is a conception of politics, and I thought that was probably a good place for myself as the pinch hitter to pick up on and address a little bit to you. Many of you may have heard your parents or other people suggest that at dinner you not talk about politics or religion, that it might interfere with your digestion or with peace at the table. The politics and religion both tend to be things that are very controversial or upsetting to some people. It's that particular point that I wanted to address and try to leave you with possibly a more positive way of thinking about politics. If you read the local press sometimes, or any local press, there are often candidates running for local office and say, I'm not a politician. I don't want politics involved here. Well, the only place, to my mind, there's no politics is in the cemetery. Living people disagree with each other. And that's what politics is about. Politics is simply when we disagree about public issues. And the question that comes up about politics is how do we resolve that disagreement? And basically, there are two ways to do it. We can use violence. We can shoot each other, or strangle, or punch. There's a physical resolution of disagreement. Or we can talk. We can talk and look for some sort of compromise, or if we can't compromise, keep talking until we find some way to resolve the difference. And the United Nations is precisely about talk and compromise. But it is extremely difficult to do, because there are people who come to the United Nations, just as there are people in communities who very strongly disagree with each other. And there may not be an easy way to resolve the disagreement, but the choice of not talking is, as I say, some means to repress. And it's about that talking and that search for compromise that there are two things that I think you need to have in mind. That is, if you're to sit down at a table and talk with someone and try to resolve your disagreements, you need to understand why it is they think what they think. That is, use a historical analysis. And particularly dealing with entire countries, you need to know, when you're dealing with another country, representatives of that country, what has gone over time to lead them to be what they are, to think what they think, to believe what they believe. The other element that is required in order to have effective negotiation and talking is an appreciation of the worldview or the ideologies, the values and beliefs of those people. Most of you from North Country communities probably do not come across people who believe that your entire vision of the world is absolutely incorrect, and they believe something else very, very different. Most of you spend time around people who mostly agree with what you believe in. You may disagree over particular issues. By and large, you spend time with people who think very much like you think. When we go to a world level, the United Nations level, dealing with people who have some very different conceptions of the world, they think the world works very differently. It may be grounded in some religious belief. You might come across people who are absolutely certain that the entire religious outlook you have and the values you have from your religion are not only incorrect but evil, and they view you as a representation of evil. Yet you want to sit down and talk to those people in a respectful way to try to avoid violence. Very difficult to do. And what all of this takes then in this search for compromise and talk is an imagination to conceive of their historical experience and their values. You may not agree with it, but hopefully you can respect it. Central America is in the news a great deal today, as it has been really for almost the entire term of the Reagan presidency. And I'm not sure the agenda that you have before you, but I'm sure that some of the committees, some of the delegations dealing with the Americans will come across Central America. And I thought I would apply a couple of these ideas to Central America just to exemplify the point I'm trying to make. In dealing with the Central American countries, basically the five of them, Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras, Costa Rica. Panama normally is not included in counting the Central American countries, but that's arbitrary. You need to understand that the people in those countries come from two different backgrounds, particularly in the north of Guatemala and El Salvador. There was the thing we call the conquest, that Europeans came to the Americas and conquered the people who were living here. In 1450, the population of North and South America was around 40 million people. By 1550, the population had fallen to 3 to 5 million. Mainly because of disease and the sword. There was an absolute destruction of entire civilizations. And the people who remained were a conquered people. And particularly in the northern part of Central America, there have been ongoing rebellions in those people to get back what they lost. There is an oral tradition that they know that the Spanish came and conquered them. So in Guatemala, there's a large indigenous population, less so in El Salvador, Honduras, almost none at all, except for a marginal group on the Gulf Coast in Nicaragua. Very little native population was ever in Costa Rica. But understanding this legacy of a system that was set up to give benefit to a few people and leaving the majority of the work is very important for understanding what is called the unrest or the rebellion in Central America today. Major event, the Mexican Revolution. It sent shivers through the They were afraid after 1910, when a civil war broke out in Mexico, that the same thing was going to happen in their country. To forestall that, there was what do we call it, an event in El Salvador in 1930. 30,000 people were killed, where the army was sent into communities to kill men, women, and children to teach them a lesson, not to rebel. There have been rebellions in Guatemala. Guatemala has been in civil war since 1954, when a government that was trying to resolve the land problem was overthrown. And going with each country, there is a history that people in that country are not necessarily the same one that you have. In the case of Central America, there are large numbers of people who believe that competition of a market economy comes at the cost of the well-being of individual people. And they believe that the value of individual people should take priority over decisions of efficiency or competition or the marketplace. That may be an incorrect view in terms of economic growth. These people call themselves Christians, sometimes Christian socialists. Others who hold the view call themselves Marxists. Others don't have labels, but they simply hold those values. And they are in conflict with others in their own countries who believe that incorporation into the world economy and marketplace and close economic ties with the United States is the way to improve the lot of people in the country. There is this disagreement on top of the historical problems. How is it going to be resolved? There may not even be a resolution. And depending upon the country you represent, or simply your view as an American, you may bring with it, say, notions of the Cold War, of problems the United States has with the Soviet Union, that have, in a sense, very little to do with the conflict in those countries. Maybe the United States takes advantage of it for its purposes, or the Soviet Union does. But you need to do the analysis to separate out these issues in order to understand that people in other countries are different, but nonetheless worthy of respect and dignity despite their difference. And I think that's what the United Nations experience that you're going through here may ultimately give you. An ability to conceive of people as different than you are, but nonetheless worthy of respect, so that you can sit down and talk with them despite the disagreements. I hope that you all gain an increased sensitivity to the rest of the world out of today, and that you carry it into other areas. The United States, for better or worse, is deeply involved in the affairs of countries all over the world. And it is much more important for Americans to be aware of what is going on around the world than many people in small countries who, whatever they may think in that small country, it doesn't make any difference. But Americans, when they vote for a president, when they vote for congressmen and senators, in a sense, are making decisions for war, peace, harmony, discord in other countries around the world. So I congratulate you all for being here. I understand, without anyone telling me, that I'm in the room here with some of, if not most of, the best students in this region. And I hope you all have a good day. Thank you.
This year's Secretariat is very excited to host the 11th Annual North Country Model United Nations. And they're very interested to hear your solutions to some of the proposed topics. Among these is one of the newest topics of AIDS, which I feel is a great danger to our society. And the Secretariat is very interested in hearing your solutions to this problem. Also, one of my personal favorites is the peaceful uses of outer space. I feel that finding peaceful uses of outer space is key to the future, because our planet is expanding so greatly that we need more places to go, and outer space, I feel, is the key to this. And as Dr. Culver talked about, Central America, which is kind of an older topic that has been debated greatly, but there's still no solution to that. And that's a very important topic, and we would like to hear your solutions to this. And also, the Middle East, which has been a problem for the world for a long time, is probably one of the oldest topics debated, but there's still no solution to that either. And we are very interested to see how you propose to solve these problems. The Secretariat has put many hours of work into this conference, and we know that you delegates have also put a lot of work and time into your preparation for the conference, and we hope it will be the best so far. This year's conference is the largest so far and also has the most countries, and this should allow a wider span of debate, and also you can give many points of view in because there are so many countries. And we expect this year's conference to be the best ever. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask anyone with a red tag, the Secretariat members, and they will help you with anything that you need. And now I will turn it over to Nicole Brett, my Undersecretary General, who has put a lot of time and effort into this year's conference. Nicole.
Good morning. At this time, I would like to give my thanks to our dedicated 1988 Secretariat. Without their help, a conference of this magnitude would not have been possible. Due to their cooperation, efficiency, hard work, and determination, they are able to host this conference for yet another year. From the Security Council, the President, Michael Zerlo. The Vice President, Joseph Zelensky. The Secretary, Aaron Powers. The Rapporteur, Brian Bayshard. From the Political Committee, the Director, Michelle Tatro. The Chairperson, Becky Boyden. Secretary, Tim Lake. Rapporteur, John LaFontaine. And Bouchard, Amy Bushy. From the Economic and Social Committee, the Director, Neil Gay. The Chairperson, Stuart Courage. The Secretary, Scott Herring. Rapporteur, Carrie Cecina. And last but definitely not least, the Legal Committee, the Director, Tammy Rabideau. The Chairperson, Amy Allard. The Secretary, Eric Ryerstall. The Rapporteur, Sarah Sample. The Mouchard, Michelle Lyman. At this time, we would like to welcome Leon Ting from Plattsburgh Central High School to address our assembly.
I'm supposed to be here talking Chinese. and I'm the delegate from the Soviet Union, so. And for instance, Pat Gary, he's my interpreter. 我代表俄国欢迎你们来联合国开会。
I'm the delegate from the Soviet Union and welcome you to the 11th annual NCCS N.C.
我们大家在一起讲话、见面，为了世界和平宣布。
We are gathered once again to further the peace and prosperity throughout the world.
现在一定要做对的事。
To the end of the members, we will try to solve the many problems that face the world fairly and justly. Hopefully, much will be achieved in the next 3 days.
好好讲话，不要打架，每一个人都有权。
Now, the progress must be made. Just and peaceful settlements of regional disputes, joint effort to reduce armaments, advance human rights, overcome underdevelopment are just some of these problems.
我们要追随世界和平，
thanks for their hard work to make this possible. Welcome, bud.
Thank you very much, Leon. Before we open the ceremonies, I would like to make sure that certain people are thanked, especially our advisor, Mr. Harry McManus, for all his time and effort. And I would also like to thank Mr. Peter Stone for his time and effort in creating or helping with our directory and also with the science. And I would also like to thank everyone else who has helped along the way, but Okay. Before we start, there are a few schedule changes. First of all, right after opening ceremonies, you're to report to your committees, and all the committees except political will start right then. Don't wait until 10:15 or whatever. It starts right after opening ceremony. And also, on the Saturday schedule, follow the one in the directory, not the one in the handbook. Okay? Now, as Secretary General, I now declare the 11th Annual North Country Model United Nations open.
Okay, we're going to keep the limit right now 2 minutes. If you feel that it's not long enough, that's a simple motion to stop it.
Can I speak from here?
Come to the podium.
I feel like the third topic should be put first because there's been a lot of escalation in the war recently since just yesterday or the day before. Iraq used a mustard gas bomb to kill and maim 5,000 innocent victims in the war. And I feel this is very pertinent, and if we address this right away and get a resolution on the floor, then we can probably move on to a different topic of just as great importance. I'm not saying the other topics aren't important, but I feel this one must be addressed first, so we can get it out of the way, then talk about something else.
Against PLO.
The topic concerning the Persian Gulf is basically the Iran-Iraq question all over. And the Iran-Iraq question is just a stalemate. We've got both sides, neither are willing to accept blame or to pay reparations. To put it first would eat up our valuable time and we would accomplish nothing.
Thank you, PLO. United States?
Take a good look at the board. It does not say Iran-Iraq conflict. It says Persian Gulf. The problem most pressing in the world right now is the Persian Gulf. Missiles are flying all over the place. We're flagging ships in the area. We feel it's justified. And I don't see any... The occupied territories, right now, there is big conflict. But as a Security Council, I think we should deal with the most pressing matter at first, because it's escalating as we speak. I wouldn't be surprised if the crisis were to deal with that. And I think we should just jump right in, because there was a resolution passed, and the only objection came from Iran, but I think we can resolve that. I really do. And occupied territories is going to take up every day, all 3 days, no doubt about it. And I think we get something done today concerning the Persian Gulf. And once again, I stress that it is not the Iran-Iraq crisis. It involves every country who has oil exported to them, every OPEC country, and there's just so many countries involved. I can't see how we want to deal with it first. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. Soviet Union, you have 2 minutes.
Persian Gulf. The Persian Gulf has been at a stalemate for so many years. I mean, we've tried over years and years to have progress, but it's still a stalemate. But right now, there's so many. The Palestine, the other two subjects right now progress is being made. There's negotiations between the two opposing factions. So I believe that we should go to the heart of the problem where change is most likely to be made. So, and the Persian Gulf is not the place where that's going to happen.
Thank you, so you mean. We'll go directly to a vote. All in favor of changing the agenda to play Persian Gulf first, raise your placard. Against? Abstain? Okay, the agenda stays as it is. Okay, we'll now, the floor is open for debate. Anybody wishing to be placed on the speakers list, raise your placard. China, Israel, PLO, Iran, UAE, France, Egypt. China, you have 2 minutes.
The situation in the occupied territories has grown very tense, with Israel denying that it has maimed and killed innocent protesters. And with the U.S. trying to get out a peace plan, Israel is denying that they even want to cooperate. I feel that the only legitimate way is to recognize the PLO and to work with the PLO, because the PLO is a legitimate representative of the Arab people. And without recognition, then we're just going to get nowhere on this. And I feel that a state should be set up where the Palestinians can have their own homeland, and they must be represented in this homeland as a state. And right now, when the United States tried to deny the PLO to even exist in the UN in New York recently, this had nothing. This didn't accomplish anything, because the UN voted almost unanimously, except with the United States and Israel voting against it, that the PLO shouldn't be in it. So I feel that the United States is just trying to undermine the process, and the only way to do this is to set up possibly a state. We have to work with Israel. That's, of course, the main objective. And without working with Israel, we're not going to get anywhere. If they continue not to want to work with the PLO, then I don't see how it's going to work.
Delegate Yielding, question. What information? Information Canada.
Will delegate yield?
Yes. Yielding all questions, so you don't have to ask.
You said we can't get anywhere without recognition of the PLO. What about recognition of Israel?
I feel both sides have to make some compromises in order to get a peace plan out.
Seeing no further points.
Motion.
Motion, United States.
Motion for a 10-minute caucus to affirm the block positions.
That motion is in order. Is there any second?
Second.
Objections? Okay, motion passes. We'll be back here at 5 after. Guess what? The whole tournament? All of
Against? Bulgaria? China, you have 30 seconds.
We just voted down Iraq. Namibia is not going to go anywhere. South Africa will not deal with us. They're not even part of the UN, so we can't do anything against them. While on the other hand, Afghanistan is a matter at hand that can be solved almost immediately. All we need to do is finish out getting some of the details ironed out in this resolution, and we'll be able to pass that up to you.
Thank you, China. Bulgaria, you have 30 seconds.
I feel that their Iraq conflict is still most important.
carry that we go directly to a vote. All in favor, raise your placards. All against? Abstentions? With 51 in favor, 33 against, 2 abstentions, the motion passes.
Motion.
Motion, United States.
Motion for a 10-minute caucus to form a block division.
That is in order at this time. All in favor? All against? It passes. We are caucus for 10 minutes.
You're a dual delegation, aren't you?
I'd like to know what you think. If you guys have any suggestions, please let me know, because
I think the U.S. should pay for education.
no, I think education, I don't, what does education mean? Well, it educates people, but that doesn't.
I don't necessarily think we should single out one
People know about it, but they'll just think, it's not going to mean.
Oh, yeah. I think we have to start testing Russia. Yeah, we should get funds for education and we have to be people. And testing, like we can.
Yeah, we get testing, yeah, but not.
No, because there's too many bushmen running around having 25 wives. Spread around. They don't use safe. And they don't. Careful. Are we going to talk about?
Can I get through?
Yep. They're not.
Soviet Union has a lot of big problems with it. But they have screwed it's the only nation that's screwed so good. It's a mandatory testing. I told them
Find a way where we can keep them all fairly. We can't discriminate against them. We can't quarantine.
Okay. Continue. Anything that has to be taken to delegate services should be typed. Working paper has to go through us again. Okay. If anybody needs notes, rip them now. Don't rip them during a speech or something like that. So if you need notes, you can rip them now. Please raise your notes for the pages. Okay, because you're having a hard time finding them. And are there any questions as of right now? There is. Roger can find the plan. If there's not, there's no motion, no nothing. Okay, I'm going to open up the speakers list. Speaking on AIDS. United States. Canada. Angola. Austria. China. Israel. Iran. Please just send a note up to the chair. I'd like to welcome you all to EcoSAR. AIDS. It's probably biggest in my country. That's the biggest problem. in my caucus, we talked about proposals for solutions to the problem. Our two biggest, solutions would be educating people about AIDS, how it spreads, and prevention, methods of prevention, and a problem was where are we going to get funding for the education and funding for the methods of prevention for countries who cannot afford it themselves. I think that countries of the world should get together. Perhaps we could create a UN committee. Perhaps we could set up maybe something kind of like the world.
Further documents on outer space to stay out of controversy as to exactly what you're talking about when you talk about outer space. You need a definition, and the 1967 Outer Space Treaty doesn't exactly, SDI is in question here, so I can't say that the 1967 treaty doesn't need a definition, as the United States pointed out. And also, SDI may be a defensive weapon, but so are anti-ballistic missiles, and we've already banned anti-ballistic missiles, and SDI would be the same thing, just a little bit more sophisticated and in outer space instead. I would propose that SDI be banned, and I would also go along with anything for any delineation or definition of outer space. I'll yield the rest of my time to questions.
Are there any questions? Seeing no questions, we now move on to the next speaker on the speakers list.
UAE.
The United Arab Emirates would like to say that they support the USSR all the way, and we think that the United States should stop the development on the SDI programs. And if the USSR feels that they have to do work on a similar based SDI program in order to protect themselves from the United States, we will support them any way we can and give them any help that they need. I yield the rest of the time to the USSR. The USSR, you have 3 minutes.
PLO and the United Arab Emirates are prepared to support the Soviet Union, and I'd like to propose starting to work on a resolution that would ban all military uses of outer space. Regardless of the defensive intent of SDI, it's just another forum for U.S. military expansion. Our goal should be to reduce the penetration of military expansion in the world today. We don't need more missiles. We don't need another forum for war. We should try to reduce this. We should try to reduce the world to a more peaceful place, not a place bristling with weapons. Therefore, I would like to invite other delegates to start drafting a resolution that would simply make space a ground for peaceful exploration and not a battlefield, and that would ban all military uses of outer space. I'm open to any questions.
I now recognize Nicaragua for 4 minutes.
We, the people of Nicaragua, believe that there's a definite need for a definition of outer space. Because in the event of a nuclear war, we would like to ensure that since our country and many other Latin American countries have no nuclear weapons, and therefore would not be fighting in a nuclear war, that we have a safe place to live afterwards. If nuclear weapons are exploding inside a certain limit, it's going to affect the atmosphere of the Earth and destroy our living conditions here. Therefore, we need a definition in which, if there was nuclear weapons used, that it would not harm the atmosphere or the land surrounding the countries that were being in the war. Also, we believe that there is no need, really, for nuclear weapons in outer space, considering that someday, with our space programs, with the United States shuttle program, that soon we might be even using that outer space, and if it is polluted with radioactive materials, nobody really knows how radioactive materials act in a vacuum, such as outer space, that perhaps the environment may become hostile for future generations that wish to travel there, settle on different planets or whatever. So we believe that
Maybe in the future, if we could just get them a little bit earlier.
We're going to chat briefly with Mike Laramie, the Secretary General today, Secretariat. Mike, what's going on here?
Well, the students are now debating major topics in the world, such as AIDS, peaceful uses of outer space, Central America, and so on and so forth, like that.
How many schools are represented here today?
There are 15 schools, including our own, Northeastern Clinton.
How do they choose their delegates? I imagine most people here would probably like to be the big powerhouses, the USs and the USSRs. How are the different countries chosen and so on?
Well, at the beginning of the year, we sent a notice to as many schools as possible around the area, and then they sent in justifications of for the countries that they want to represent. And we read those, and depending on how they did with those justifications, we would assign them countries. So, like with China, whoever wrote the best justification would get that country.
So, let's pick a country like France. Is it broken down? Is the whole school here as France, one particular school, or is one committee here for France and another committee from another school might represent France? How's that done?
One school represents one country. All the delegates from one country come from the same school. That facilitates communication within the country. They can represent the country better that way. They can represent a whole, and they will come from the same angle instead of being from different schools. They wouldn't
They're able to coordinate their efforts here. Now, could you tell us briefly what each of these committees does? I think we've been to 4 different places. We've seen 4 different committees. Could you go over those and tell us briefly what they all are?
Okay, well, I'll start with the Security Council because that's considered the most important in the United Nations. And they're the only ones that have, the Security Council is the only committee that has the power to dispense UN forces. So that gives them the power, so-called power in the UN. And they debate like any crisis areas like Central America, the Middle East, and any other crisis that will occur. They will debate that. Like later on, we're anticipating a crisis in the world later on this week, and then they will debate that. We do a simulated crisis for them, and then they'll be debating that later this week. The legal committee, they debate mainly legal matters like with the peaceful uses of outer space. They have to define the limits of outer space and what you can do with that. So that's mainly legal issues. Then ECOSOC, you debate economic and social issues, and like AIDS is an economic or a social issue. Morality, reporting and all that. That deals with the social issues, so it's debated in ECOSOC. And then political, that deals mainly with disputes between countries like Namibia and South Africa, and they debate the political side of the issues. So that's the summary of all 4 committees.
How many countries are represented here?
I believe there's 97 countries here today.
And how much advance notice do these people have as to which country they're representing?
I believe about 3 or 4 months ago we sent out a list of what schools had which countries. So they began preparing about 4 months ago.
So someone who's representing, say, South Yemen has been studying South Yemen and their political philosophy, supposedly?
Yes, they should have been studying that for quite a while, and they should be able to represent that country as if it were in a real United Nations. They should have a complete understanding of it.
So they're not here necessarily espousing their own view. They're here trying to talk and putting themselves in the other person's shoes from that country.
They're role-playing the model from the real United Nations, acting as a real country, not their own philosophies.
Knowing some of the kids from other schools, I've seen freshmen here and all the way up to seniors. Do you know how each school picks their people to come here?
Well, it's up to the individual school, but I believe most of them will require a position paper or some other type of document to prove that that student is able to represent that country. And then the same thing with our justifications. We determine which schools get which countries. The schools determine which students get to represent countries in the same type of process. They use position papers which state a country's position on policies in each committee and so on like that. So, they determine among themselves how, who's going to represent what country.
Now, you said back at the beginning of our interview that each school sent in position papers. Who goes over those position papers? Who decides, who makes that big critical choice that, all right, PHS is going to be the Soviet Union today, or so on?
Well, generally, we don't read them unless...
Who is we? Tell me
okay.
who we are.
It's myself as Acting Secretary General and Nicole Lebrecht as Under Secretary General. And then if we don't, Nicole and I don't agree on something, we'll go to Mr. McManus and he'll read it over and, tell us his opinion. We don't necessarily have to follow his opinion because he feels it's our conference and we determine, Nicole and I determine what schools get what countries.
So how many of these different papers did you have to read over?
Well, China was a big...
popular choice?
Yeah, it's a popular choice. There's 3 schools that wanted China, and so we read each of those. I read the 3 for China, and Nicole read the 3, and then we chose Shazy out of the 3 to represent China, and Mr. McManus also read them after we made our decision, and he agreed with us on that. So.
Okay, I see a lot of Northeastern students here busying themselves. What other type of duties do some of these Northeastern people have today, besides being delegates and so on?
Well, in each committee there's a group of pages which deliver notes from country to country, and that is supposed to cut down on the talking committee. One country can send a note to another country, asking them their position on a resolution, a working paper, and so on. And also we have delegate services, which type the resolutions for us. They type the name tags for us. And there's also delegate services with the food servers that serve the food for the delegates at lunchtime. And I think that's about all we have for services.
Just one final question. Does this, outside of being a great experience, does this count for marks in any particular subject for the kids involved, or what happens here besides the experience?
Well, at Northeastern, we don't get any credit for doing UN. We're just allowed to go to Harvard, United Nations, and that's, on our own. We don't get credit for that. We just do it on our own initiative. And we sell pizza at lunchtime to raise money for that. And working at North Country Model United Nations, that's just all on our own. There's no class set up for it. We don't get credit for it. It's all just our own work by ourselves. And our advisor is Mr. McManus, and, he advises us to what to do, but we don't get credit for it.
So this is not, say, part of the world history curriculum or anything like that?
No, the UN program itself isn't, but Mr. McManus in his 10th grade class, the last quarter, he teaches a UN, and they run a UN simulation during that whole 10-week period. And they get credit for that, but that doesn't deal with Harvard, United Nations, or North Country Model United Nations.
So probably in a very real sense, this is kind of an extracurricular type activity as far as the Northeastern, just like playing volleyball or bowling or whatever else, right?
Yes, that's correct. It's just like a sport. You don't get any credit or anything for it.
Well, you get...
Well, recognition, yes. But.
And plus you get a great experience.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for talking with us, Mike, and good luck the rest of the next 3 days.
To keep peace alive and to save future generations from the scourge of war.
Es ist sehr wichtig, dass alle Menschen verstehen, wie wichtig die Vereinten Nationen sind für den Kampf für das Überleben.
As evident from this conference, there's still hope left. It's important that people realize the importance of the UN for our struggle for survival.
Es ist ein endloser Kampf, Frieden zu erreichen. Und jeden Einzelnen lernt die Kunst, Frieden zu halten, was sehr gut ist für unsere Welt in dieser Konferenz.
Peace is a never-ending struggle, and everyone at this conference is learning about the art of peacekeeping, which is something that will do the world good.
Dan, ich danke Herrn Latour für die Hilfe, die ich immer von ihm hatte.
Oh, and by the way, we'd like to thank Mr. Ledoux for all his support and help during the year. Thank you.
from NCCS. And Matt Midlinski. Adam West. Lenny Villian from Israel. Maya Gimmel, Miss Kenya from NCCS. That's it. Thank you.
And now, present the awards from the legal committee, Cammy Rocky, with the rest of the
I don't know what kind of rumors the other committees heard, but legal committee did run much more smoothly on Friday, and I was very proud of my delegates. I don't want anyone in here thinking that they didn't do a good job.
No stories on Friday.
Please refrain.
Okay. I'm going to start with, I have two honorable mentions. And first one I have is Desiree Robertson, who represents
We're going to chat now very briefly with Harry McManus. Harry, what's your official duties here as part of this North Country Model United Nations?
Well, I'm the advisor of the North Country Model UN, but I've got to say that the conference began as a student idea 11 years ago upon returning from a trip from Harvard and the Harvard Model UN. The students came back and said, let's take this idea that we participate in every year at Harvard and bring it back to the North Country for all the students in the North Country. But my role has been one of advising the Secretariat and many of the delegates in terms of their preparation. And it gets easier every year because these people just do an outstanding job.
I imagine as you get people that have more and more experience at it, the younger underclassmen learn as they watch the seniors and upperclassmen go through the motions. Is it just high school students to take part?
Yes, we do have had over the years a few junior high school students, and they normally go on and then participate for 4 years. So each year the level of debate seems to get that much better because of the expertise. And of course many of these students, even from the other schools, in addition to attending this conference, do also go to the Harvard UN conference. So I think the level of debate this year was probably higher than it ever has been.
Now, we just saw the awards, and some of these people won outstanding delegates from those certain countries. Do they kind of have a dibs on that for next year, or do they have to submit letters again saying why they want to be, like, let's say, Kip Ladd from Shazy? If he wants to come back as China next year, is he going to have to resubmit, reapply for it?
Everything starts over next year. Obviously, Kip will be attending the Harvard conference in December of this year, and then hopefully again, I believe he's a junior, will be attending this conference again in the spring. But everything starts over each year. They have to make a new application. As a matter of fact, I'm sure the advisor from Shazy may want him to be in a situation, for example, where he might represent a different country. One of the goals of the conference is to try and get as many different perspectives on these very heavy international issues as possible so that students can understand that there are more points of view in the world. But I'm sure Kip's application will be an outstanding one, as will many of the other students who have won awards this year.
So it's actually better if the student is able to come in as a different country in the following years. Now, you had, what, 14 or 15 schools, including Northeastern this year, and how many delegates?
We had 15 schools this year, which is an all-time high for us, and we had about 450 delegates, which is considerably up from last year. So on the theory that bigger is better, I guess, we can say that it was, but I also feel that in fact the preparation level was higher this year than it ever has been.
11 years ago, that would take us back to probably 1978 or so. How big was it then? How many schools involved? How many delegates?
Okay, the first year in '78, we started very small. We had 125 delegates, and we had 6 schools. And it's obviously grown. One of the things I'm probably the most proud of is the fact that in addition to the number of schools growing, the interest at each of those schools has also grown, so that where schools like Peru and Plattsburgh and Shazy and Beekmantown, who participated in the first one, may have sent 6 or 7 delegates, they're now sending 40 or 50 delegates. So their own individual programs have also grown at their schools, in addition to it obviously growing at Northeastern also.
Well, from what I've seen, it's been a very successful 3 days, and I want to thank you for chatting with us, and congratulations on another successful endeavor. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you feel is important that we should probably mention?
Let me just sum up by saying that I was really blessed this year with 2 outstanding young people, Michael Laramie and Nicola Breck, who were my Secretary General, Undersecretary General. They really set the tone for the conference. They worked many hundreds of hours to set this up. They got their directors to do the work and so on, and I can't be prouder of those people. They just did an outstanding job. And of course, Calvin, we'd like to thank you for the coverage here also. I think many of the parents out there see their students or hear about their students participating in the North Country UN. We do have many of them come up here and watch, but now they'll have an opportunity to see their young people in action on television, so we're very pleased with that too.
We're glad to do it, and thank you for talking with us, Harry.
Okay, Calvin, thanks. And Calvin, thank you. Really.
Sorry.